All right. Welcome back, everybody, to your podcast where every car tells a story. We are To All the Cars I've Loved Before, or as I like to call it, Cars Love Nation. I'm Christian. He is Doug. Get a hold of me, Christian at carslove.com. He is Doug at carslove.com. And this is a special Blue Angels weekend, and where I sit in my air-conditioned bunker. The Blue Angels, this is their air show they do every July. They were streaking over my house, and we had to wait until all the roar of freedom, as they say, died down, so it wouldn't drown me out as I was speaking. So they have a practice show today, another practice show tomorrow. The real deal is Saturday. And hey, I am in the mood. It gets the blood pumping, which is good because we have a great guest today who is, we'll get into this in a minute. Doug, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Great to be back here with you. That's my tagline.
All right, sounds good. And I've been having some internet problems. This is what happens when you get your internet from Dollar Tree. It's a little spotty. It's a little iffy. But you know what? Hey, I got it back there where you can get the discount orange juice. But we'll try it again.
I didn't know dial-up was still a thing, but you proved me wrong.
Yeah, well, this is a spin. This is dial-up with a rotary phone. So it's actually very curious the way it goes. But a little bit of housekeeping as we normally do. We see the stats go up. Want to thank everybody. The audience is growing. Again, all around the world, we can see the downloads, especially in Europe. I don't know if it was my recent trip to Ireland, but very excited to have you aboard. If you would like to be on the show, if you are a car nut or just fascinated with we get this a lot where people say, hey, I like the spirit of the show. I'm not a huge car person, but you know what? Invariably, those people have some of the most interesting stories to tell. Okay.
Or they may have a car nut friend. Sorry for the interruption. They may have a car nut friend. Refer us to your car nut friends.
Love it.
Oh, too.
Yeah, one of our earlier tandem guests in season 1 was a husband and wife team, Adam, who we love, who goes way back with Doug. But, his wife, Melissa, was an even better guest. I mean, she is way up there in the pantheon of guests here. So, yeah, very, very good point. So every car tells a story. Feel free to reach out to us. And, get involved. Email us, okay? You also check out carslove.com. More and more we're seeing in the analytics that more and more people are actually listening to the show from the site itself, carslove.com. So you can listen to the episodes there, as well as Doug has us propagated all over the internet. I think we're on what are we on? Spotify. We're on of course,
Spotify,
Apple Podcasts,
Apple,
we're everywhere.
Castro, you name it, we're on it.
Yeah, FidelCastro.com. Who would have known that he would have started an ISP? But yeah, we're huge in Cuba. What can you say? So listen to the episodes. Follow the show. Download the episodes. Follow the show. We track all that. And we love to get all the feedback from listeners too. So do please feel free. Do we have anything, Doug, to share with listenership? It's been a week or two since we've recorded, so we're jumping back in with both feet. Anything new about the show? Any guests we want to tease? Shows upcoming? Anything you want to share before we introduce this week's guest?
Yeah. Well, besides this week's guest, who I went to high school with, and we had another mutual friend that we went to high school with, who was also a guest, Joe. We just interviewed a very famous former rock crawler turned professional monster truck driver turned YouTube star. Yeah. And can't wait to get that episode out. We're just going to keep dropping little tidbits, but what a great lady. And gosh, so much to say.
Nicole Johnson. Yep.
Named Nicole Johnson, and Nicole Johnson's Detour, former driver of the Scooby-Doo monster truck.
Yeah. So check her out at Nicole Johnson's Detour.com. And that'll get you to the show on YouTube. It's just blowing up. It's so much fun. And Yeah, but not to bear the lead here. Let's bring in today's guest. And by way of prologue here, Doug, when I say barn find, what do you think? What's a barn find to you?
So, Barn Find, and there's a great show on YouTube, by the way, called Barn Find Hunter that I like.
Yeah,
But
there is.
Barn
There
Find
is.
is just a car that got left behind. Maybe it broke down.
That's right.
Maybe
That's right.
somebody passed away.
That's
Maybe
right. That's
somebody
right.
had a car buying habit and
Mm-hmm.
not their repair
Mm-hmm.
budget in mind, and they just got
Lovely.
forgotten. And
Perfect.
so there you have it.
And
That's what I
that's
call a car.
perfect. That's perfect. And
You're
and,
welcome.
and the setup is that you find these cars in a barn, which is the perfect prologue to today's guest, because as we're talking to him, guess where we found him? In a barn. Today's guest is a little bit of a barn find. His name is James. I just met him. Delightful gentleman. But he is joining this podcast we're recording. He is in his barn, surrounded by a bunch of cars, some simply skeletons, some chassis, some in different states of repair, restoration. This one needs a paint job. This one's on a lift. That one doesn't have the body. He's got a 31 Packard frame that he just got a 41 Packard motor for. He's going to tell you all about it. But since he and Doug go way back, I am going to gently hand the introduction baton to Doug so that he can tell you a little bit more about James.
Yeah, well, James and I go back to probably middle school and certainly through high school. Haven't talked in about 30 years, but recognized his voice on the phone like yesterday. Joked
I didn't
around
realize
about
that. You guys just
yeah, we
you guys
reconnected through
you knew
Joe.
him then, but you did
Yeah,
you have not heard this guy's voice in 30
Nope,
years.
it's
correct.
been a
I
long time.
love that. Didn't
Yeah.
realize that. Love that. Sorry, didn't mean to break in, but
Yeah,
that's
no,
fantastic. Please continue, Doug.
And it's so I had heard from Joe, our former guest, that James
Right.
does auto restoration on the Eastern Shore. Like that is his job, classic auto restoration.
Perfect guest. The perfect
Yeah,
guest.
perfect guest. He has lots of stories, not only of his own cars, but of these cars that, they're hobbyist cars, right? So he's restoring them, and
Yeah.
somebody who's holding on to an old car, right? They've got some stories behind it, right? Whether it was the grandmother's car, right? What grandfather's car, whether
Yeah.
it was the neighbor's car, whether the wife had one just like it, but had to get rid of it 40 years ago, and she's been dying to have it back or something close to it ever since.
Yes.
So kind of with that, and it's funny, James and I were talking, and he filled out our online form about his first car, which was I will leave it to him, but I remember that car in high school, and I remember that car doubling
Yeah.
as a police look-alike vehicle.
Oh boy.
But let's
Yeah.
let James, feel free to introduce yourself. Tell us about where you live, what you do, and
Okay.
we can talk about your first car, which is definitely a family affair.
Well, thank you both, Doug and Christian, for having me on the podcast.
Thank you.
I'm honored to be on here, and this is a lot of fun. And listening to some of your other podcast people talking about their cars, it's been really enjoyable. So,
Thank you.
going back to my first car, so yeah, it's a bit embarrassing now. It was a 77 Caprice Classic. It came from one of my grandparents. And I think it was maybe, if my memory serves, it was a couple $100 or something, or it may be worked off the the payment or something. But it
Mowed the
was a
lawn.
four-door, yeah, mowed the lawn. It was a four-door Caprice Classic, two-tone. It had a 302 or a 305. I'm trying to remember what it had. It was a V8, but it wasn't a big one, and it was a two-barrel carb, so it wasn't fuel efficient, nor was it very powerful. But as you know, with first cars, it was freedom. and
Yes.
it didn't matter. I
So well
was
put.
in love with that car, and I think my neighbor would say, if you wax that car anymore, you're going to wax the paint right off of it. And I didn't. I tried to make it as clean as possible, and it did look later like a Caprice undercover car of the day from the
Yeah.
80s.
Yep.
Because at one point I had to put new tires on it, and they didn't put the white walls on the outside. So it had black walls on it, which all the police cruisers look like that. And I think it was just kind of, tongue in cheek, but it was two-tone. It would never pass. But it was fun.
Right.
It did get me through a couple speed traps on the way to Ocean City one time.
There are many.
But
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
but it was like many that have the first car. I was lucky to have it. And I was probably mid 17 to 18 when I got
Okay.
it. I got my license though when I was 16 and a half, and I was driving my parents' Toyota. They had one of those Tercels, the hatchback. And it was a economy little car, but that's what I learned to drive on. And when the Caprice came in, it was a V8. It had power steering, power brakes, power locks. It had air conditioning. It had a big back seat, a big front seat. It was bench seats.
Oh, bench
Huge,
seats. Yep.
yeah, bench
Like
seats. It
driving
had
a
huge
speedboat,
trunk.
right, on land. Yeah.
It was a land yacht, and I think Joe had one too. He had a big convertible land yacht.
Yes, he did.
So we could relate, and they were horrible on gas, just absolutely horrible. But gas was $1.50, $2 a gallon, I think back then, until the first Gulf War, and Doug and I were probably shelling out over $2 a gallon, thinking, how are we going to do this? And it was how little did we know where that would have gone, but
Right.
that
So
car turned into freedom. And I drove that
yeah.
car for several years, and I loved that car because of what it was. I remember putting a Pioneer stereo system in it and an amplifier.
Pioneer.
Yeah, the old Alpine amplifiers and subwoofers and stuff. And it was learning how to wire stuff, tinker with the car. The car always had this really bad fault when I was going to the community college, where it would stall on this one hill every time when it was cold, and it was a left-hand turn going uphill, and it would stall every time. And I had to go that way. I couldn't go a different way. And I'd be stuck in the middle of the intersection, all these people honking at me, have to get out, open the hood, and then stick a finger down to get the choke to open up and get unstuck. And then, so you're going to school smelling like gas. It was always, fun. But, the memories you have, I remember that to this day. It was freezing out and your hands cold and you smell like gas.
So what happened to that car?
So that car ended up going to my younger brother, and that became his first car.
Okay.
And he was 3 years younger. I drove it for several years, and when he got his license, I ended up buying the next car was an 85 Olds Toronado. I bought it from my stepfather, and it was all gold, and it had tan interior and the sheep cloth interior. It was the epitome of the 80s. It was a gold vinyl top.
Rich Corinthian leather.
It was Caliente. It was a front-wheel drive V8.
Yeah, I was going to say that was a front-wheel drive V8 vehicle.
And I loved that about that car. It was really good in the snow. It was great handling. It actually was very smooth riding, but it had the biggest doors. It was a two-door, and the biggest doors of any car I've ever owned. And I remember taking that car when I went away to school at Towson State and trying to park in the parking garage, and you can't open the door to get out of the car. Yeah. Forget it. You have to find a spot like on the end that you could get the driver's door open without hitting a car. So it was limiting in that respect. But I ended up driving that car for a number of years, and it was a great car. We had a lot of fun. I back and forth from Annapolis to Towson in that car, and it was the car had a digital dash. Remember the early Oldsmobile, and it would roll up to 188 and then roll back down. Well, this car had this glitch where you'd be driving along on 695 and all of a sudden the dash would roll up to 188 and roll back down, and you'd have to pound on the dash and it would come back on. And you could never trust the little gauge of gas. It had these little bars. And I remember one time I ran out of gas and I had 2 bars left, and I
Oh
was
no.
walking distance of the gas station. I said, that's it. I'll never trust those bars of gas again. And the digital was not as accurate, I guess. But I had that car for a number of years. And I think that car went to my younger brother after I was done with it. And the Caprice moved on somewhere else. And when I owned that car, I ended up buying at a good friend's, his mom had an estate sale, and there were 2 Triumph Spitfires in the estate sale
Oh
over
boy.
in Sherwood Forest.
This is what
And
started it all. All
it
right.
started it, yeah. I said, can we go look at them? And he said, yeah, I'm doing the sale. Let's go look. And I fell in love. I said, how do I get one of these? And he said, well, they're $1,000 a piece, you know.
Oh,
And I'm like, that's a lot of cash. I was going to school and I was working. So I just I did it. I bought it and I didn't look back. The car was I would call John Deere green, but it was
oh,
Triumph
beautiful.
green or Kermit green. And
Not the
it was
British racing green? That's
not British
distinct from
racing
British
green.
racing green. Got you.
Yeah,
Got you.
it wasn't that dark, but it
Okay.
was bright green, so to speak.
Okay, so there were 2 Spitfires, right?
Yeah, there were 2 in the sale. One was
Okay.
mustard yellow, and the other one was this light green color.
Go with the
And
green. Okay.
the green had a
Well,
soft top. The yellow one had a hard top and overdrive. And I liked the green one. It just sang to me, so I bought that. But I didn't know it didn't have brakes.
both
So,
76s. I'm sorry. The year was both
oh no, I'm
76s,
sorry.
right?
Todd, my friend Todd bought the other one, and that was in 1980, and it was
Got it.
one of the last years I think of the Spitfire, 80 or 81, and it had overdrive. It was a little switch on the stick shift,
Yeah.
and his had brakes, but it would only do like 40 miles an hour. It had some weird water choke or something, but mine didn't have brakes, but it could drive. So I had to follow him from Sherwood Forest all the way back to St. Margaret's Road in Annapolis, using his bumper as a brake and a handbrake, what's left of the
Oh
handbrake.
boy.
It was like watching Beavis and Butthead try to drive 2 vintage cars. Stop ramming me, Beavis. It
And
was
of
crazy.
course, this was at night, right, James?
This was that, yeah, we did not do that in the day. I think that was late in the evening or something, but,
Yes.
and I don't even remember if the lights worked, but I
Yeah.
just remember the smile on our faces driving. It's like we stole the show or something. And these people are probably looking at us like, why did they buy those? It was just, I was 20 or 21 years old, 20 years old. And I remember my parents saying, how can you afford 2 cars? I was like, I just did it. I didn't think about it. I had to have that car.
Hmm.
And I never regretted owning the car. Um, it was one of those experiences that took me to where I am today. It set
Yeah.
that seed. It planted that seed where that love of working on it and tinkering on it turned into a business later down the road. But it was a car that I ended up taking from Annapolis to Towson, and I ended up joining an MG club at Towson to justify the insurance on the car because you were only supposed to use it for parades and special events.
Right.
And I'm under 21 years old, and to have a convertible when you're that young is really expensive. So I got historic
Right.
tags, and I think it was with Allstate at the time. And they said, well, you can only drive a certain amount of miles a year, and you have to use it for events. And I said, well, that's a big gray area. What's an event?
Right.
Is a monthly meeting up at Towson at the MG Club an event? That sounds like an event. And
Agreed.
so I joined this club, and I still to this day have the patch from one of the rallies I did. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
kept it
And
all
Oh, whoa, whoa,
year.
whoa, whoa.
MG's of
Yeah,
Hold that up.
Baltimore.
Hold that up.
yeah. MG's the Baltimore Historic Rally. I pulled that down for you guys. So that
Thank you.
was one of
Look
the
at
first
that.
rallies I did. We ended up driving the Triumph. My girlfriend at the time at Towson went with me as a co-pilot, and we did a time speed distance rally where you drove. It was from Towson out to Mount Area, and we did all these back roads, and it wasn't about speeding. It was about keeping the proper speed. So whoever was closest to the speed won that leg. And then they had a parking lot set up where you do cone drills. And, and the Spitfire had one of the best turning radiuses of any car I've ever owned. And it did the best in that cone execution, because you could literally turn the wheels sideways. It had incredible turning radius. But it just kind of, I did a couple rallies with them, and it just kind of was like, wow, this is fun. And all these like-minded people were doing this. And I just kind of fell in love with that. When I left school and I moved to the Eastern Shore, I brought the car with me and I used it for quite some time. And then it developed I'd say a bad noise. There was a crack in the head that I was always adding water to it, and I could never find it, and it perpetuated into a worse and worse problem. And one day it just died, and then sat, and it was nothing sadder than seeing a car you love with grass growing up around it in the yard.
Yes.
So I think we've all seen those pictures, and I ended up selling it to my brother's girlfriend.
Keeping it in the family again, James.
Yeah, it was I think whatever truck payment was at the time, $400, $300. And she took it, and knowing that the engine was shot, and had it rebuilt and used it. And I got to drive it one last time. It was really cool. And then
that is fantastic.
They brought it down, my brother and her, and they let me take it out for one last drive. And then I'm not sure where the car ended up after that. They broke up and I never saw it again. But it was one of those experiences that for years it stuck with me. But I would drive that car, and I would imagine some of your, I say older podcast listeners. I'm old. I'm 51, but I'm not. Doug and I,
you're vintage.
Going back, we're vintage. But these cars were not. That was a '76 that was 3 years older than I was when I was born. That was not a vintage car, but it was vintage enough in 91, 92, 93 when I was driving it. It's a 25-year-old car. And I would drive that car at 11:30, 12 o'clock at night from Annapolis, where I was living, up to Towson and over to, the Beltway, with a vintage British car that barely had headlights, Lucas Electronics, and was prone to overheating. And I had no cell phone. This is before cell phones. And I didn't have a care in the world or a worry that I would make it. I just, caution to
trust
the wind.
In the universe.
Just trust in the universe, and to people that might stop and help you. And it was one of the most freedom type of things where you just go. And then for so many people that I've talked to in this business that have grown up with these cars, older than myself, that's how they lived with them. They drive these cars cross country and not give a thought to it. And, I had somebody recently helped to find a home for a '67 Mustang that was going up to Philly. And the guy said, "Do you think I can drive it back to Philly from here?" And I said, "I don't see why not. Be prepared, make sure that you have, coolant and oil." And the car was fully restored. It was gorgeous. It was 20-year-old restoration, but it was immaculate. And he drove that car back, not a problem, 3 hours to Philly. And, that was commonplace. That was a car that was built to be driven every day. And I think we lose sight of that sometimes. Now, it's not going to be as comfortable as the modern car, and it's not going to be as fuel efficient and the creature comforts, but that was a nice car back in the day. So I got that Spitfire under my skin, and I loved it, and I always had a soft spot for it. And then a couple of years ago, I sat in one that a customer brought by, and I just said, "This car got really small." I don't know how I fit in this car, and getting in and out of it.
They shrink over time.
They
You put them in the dryer, and
exactly. But there's such a love for these cars, and then you look at some of the prices that Spitfires are bringing, it's like, oh my gosh, I should have kept the darn thing. But
Should
who
have.
would have thought, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Exactly.
that's where it started with those cars, and then along the way, I never lost the love for the sports cars or the European cars, and had many different jobs, and ended up about 7 years ago, 8 years ago, getting back into classic cars, working for somebody, and it did that for a year, and then started out with a business partner, and we did that for 3.5 years. And partnerships are tough. We worked hard. We had a really good client base, and we've went on our own way, and I started over. And my love has been for keeping these things on the road as best I can, and
Okay.
learning as much as I can about them.
So, yeah, that's okay. So perfect segue. That's where we wanted to navigate the conversation to. So, would you mind telling us a little bit, if you feel comfortable, sharing the business name?
Oh yeah.
How do you? I said I'm fascinated by uh, small businesses like these. Sort of what's the cadence on a car? How long does it take? What are you comfortable doing? Is it kind of one of these from the ground to the crown things? In other words, you handle everything, or
I've done that on a couple full restoration, or finished a full restoration on it was a 53 MGTD that later we had a customer that did a full restoration on it, and we did finish the car, and it went to a concours, and it won an award, and it was a really nice car. And then, but it was a car that did 45 miles an hour. You don't drive those on the highway, really. They're not
okay,
suited for that.
yeah,
Everybody's so much faster nowadays. And he ended up selling it, taking it to auction, and getting another British car. He got an MGB GT that's a little faster with overdrive. But yeah, I've done full restoration. That does take time. It does take years. It's not a TV show. It depends on how many people you can throw at it. And the TV shows throw 25 or 30 people, but it's not realistic. I like watching some of the stuff because it makes you laugh, and you
Right.
old
yeah,
cars are like old houses, and you run into stuff, and it's usually rust, and it's usually not good.
yeah.
So you have to have the stomach for it if you're going to get into it, and you have to know sometimes when to say when, or what's a good candidate. And as it as I am, like everybody else, you're learning every day the better way to do it, and you have to be open-minded, because sometimes you don't know everything, and there are other people that, especially that have been doing this a long time, that you listen to, and you learn from their experience. And that's been the greatest teacher for me. Like I said, I have a mentor that is 81, that was a Mercedes mechanic and European specialist for 52 years, and he's
Okay.
retired, but he comes in every week and checks on me. And it's like a college education. You can learn more in 5 minutes listening to this gentleman than you can reading a book. I mean, it's just somebody's been there and done that, and that's what we
yeah.
need. We're losing that every day. We have in Easton, we have a gentleman named Dickie Moreland that he rebuilds crankshafts. He's one of the few that's left that still does it. There are very few engine rebuilders in this area. There used to be several, and now we lost these people. It's become a lost art, and
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
I'm trying to soak up as much of this information as possible. So my business, when I started over, it's called McCrae Enterprises LLC. It's
Okay.
just my last name. Enterprises, because I do a little bit of everything, but mostly it's European uh, sports cars and classic cars, some American classic cars. I do a lot of 50s, 60s, 70s, some 80s cars. Um, I've done a couple 90s cars, but it starts getting into computer stuff. I'm more comfortable with carburetors and early
Okay.
fuel injection.
Hmm.
It's just what I've been working on, and I know my limits, and they're not so much on the newer stuff. So I just feel more comfortable with the older stuff, points and condenser and coil plugs, wires, that type of stuff. It's pretty straightforward, and
Is it
I like that.
is it
Go ahead.
hard for you to get parts for a lot of these cars? That's one question I have.
Great
Second question is
That's a
second
good
question is
question.
what happens when you get stuck or you need to find documentation? Do you have a huge library? Do you find things
Um,
online? Do you get manuals on? How
well,
does that
I can
work?
show you. I've
Oh, look
got,
at that. It's like a library. Yeah.
yeah, I've got a good collection of books for a lot of the cars I work on.
Oh, I
Uh,
think I saw Chilton's manuals.
oh yeah, you'll probably see a couple, and then
Yeah.
there's Haynes.
Our younger listeners don't know about those, but those
Yeah. Well,
pre-internet.
and I'm going to let you in on a little secret called YouTube.
Yes, sir.
There is, I know it's a joke and YouTube mechanic certified and all that stuff, but I'm going to be honest with you. There are a lot of people that, especially if you get into a situation where you've never been into that part of the car or have to diagnose something, it is a really valuable resource because there's like-minded people that are struggling with the same thing.
Yeah.
And these forums, there are a lot of forums that are specific to the car, and I recommend going to those. There's nothing better than a owners group that has 25, 30, 50 years of experience on a car, that has been there and done that, that can lead you down the path to fix a problem. I've had so many times where I've talked to people and you find that you pull a thread here and it takes you to another thread on a forum, and then you find your answer or at least a way to solve a problem. So yeah,
Gotcha.
the internet's a huge part of it, but
Yeah.
also I have had a lot of success with vendors and private companies that sell parts where they have experience and expertise in certain car makes, and they have
I
the
see.
answers. You can
And
usually, you're going to find in most cases that the people that are selling the parts or selling the cars, they're passionate too, and they want to see them stay on the road, so they're going to help you. I've had so many cases. I've had clients, I've had vendors that have sent me thousands of dollars in parts without me paying for it. I mean, trust.
Wow. Yes.
That's very unusual in this day and age, where they say, I'm going to send you an invoice, you mail me a check, and I've had that happen a couple times, and that is remarkable that that happens still, and it is a testament to some people. It's kind of it's amazing because most people will be like, give me your credit card number and I'll send it out once it's paid for.
right.
But I've had several instances that's happened, and then I've those same people have helped me diagnose an issue or a particular issue on like a 1940 Buick that I was having, and just remarkable. And they've been doing that for 50 years. That's all they do. And if you, I just say, if you're into a certain car and you're having trouble, find an owners group, join a club on Facebook,
Yep.
ask the question.
Facebook's a good gateway.
Yes, absolutely. And my motto has been for years, you don't know unless you go. You don't know unless you ask. Yeah, you may not like the answer, but if you don't ask, you will never know the answer. And
So
sometimes
true.
asking the question will end up getting you another project car. Ask me how I know. So,
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
that's bitter experience, but you know, that's just what happens, and we keep them going. So, but yeah, the business I work on mainly these 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, some 40s I work on. The Packard's my own project, and that's taking up most of my shop. But that's a passion project that I've always wanted to build, and it's slowly coming along. I did last year for my 50th, I bought a 911 from a customer that I just couldn't refuse the deal. And he wanted a newer one, and his wife wouldn't let him have two. So
Well, why'd you have to
I,
have it? Why'd you have to have it? Was
I've
it him? Was it the car? Was it
it was the
something
car.
about it?
It was the car. I've always wanted a 911. I
Okay.
wanted an air-cooled 911, but
Yep.
the prices are so astronomical. Even a junker is just a fortune. And
Yes.
I've worked on
Agreed.
a lot of them, and I have a client that's got a bunch. And if I
You
ever
you
want
have
to
one right
drive
behind
one,
you,
yeah, there's one
actually,
behind me, but yeah, the green one's the
up on the
68.
lift.
Love the
But we,
color. I can see just a
yeah,
little bit of color peeking out beneath the
it's like
cover.
an anaconda green, I think, or a conda green they call it.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
that was almost the color of my Triumph Spitfire, believe it or not. It was
Wow.
about that green. It was repainted, and I don't think it was the original green. But the 911 he had for 10 years, it's a 99 996 six-speed cab. And I knew the car, I knew him, and I knew the people that worked on it, and all the usual suspects, the things on 996s that everybody complains about, had already
Yep.
been taken care of. And you know, it was an opportunity that I was looking at a BMW at the time that another client had. It was a 323i 5-speed convertible, low mileage. And we were talking price, and I was getting anxious. And then this 911 popped up that was way more than the BMW. And I remember taking a picture of each to my wife and saying, if you had an opportunity to buy, if I could buy one of these cars, which car would you drive? And she said, oh, I drive the 911. And I said, okay, that answered it. It's done. Let's
I
do
see.
it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I bought that car a year and a half ago. I've driven it maybe 6 or 7 times. I worked so much, it's in the garage at home. Every time I take it out, it's like therapy. It's,
Yeah.
296 horsepower in a 911 is nothing nowadays. But it's not just the horsepower. It's, now they're 400 and 500, 600 horsepower
Yes, they
out of a
are. Yep.
flat six. And you can't compete with that, but it's the handling, it's the way the car responds. And Doug, you've had a 996, you know how they
Yep.
feel. It's the closest I could get to an air cooled by 1 year, affordability wise. But there's nothing like, I always said to myself that if I could afford one sports car, it'd be a 911. I grew up, my best friend in school, Todd, had a 74 911S Targa that I rode around in, and I just loved that car. The way the car handled, the way it sounded, the way it could take a curve and pull out of it. It was just something about 911. And so it always stuck with me. And I said, one day I want to own one. And it fell in my lap, and I don't regret it at
Yep.
all. So I look forward to the times I take it out. And I actually have a new
Well,
exhaust up on the shelf for it, waiting to go on it.
well,
Or
I
as
tell
they
you
say,
what.
heat exchangers, right?
Yeah.
On the old one.
Yeah. The Pfister exhaust. Have you ever heard of those?
I
Um,
think so. Yep.
Pfister out of California. It does a lot of 911 exhausts, and it's kind of like a automatic bypass, or it's a built-in bypass. So I'm
Gotcha.
looking forward to putting that on and doing some
Yeah.
maintenance to the car. But
Well,
shop is full.
we
Yeah.
have to have and that might be the perfect place to kind of draw us to a close here, because
Sure,
what we have to have James back, because as I'm telling you, this guy's a barn
I'd be
finder.
honored.
Found him in a barn. But if he pivoted this for our listenership who can't see, he pivoted his phone, and he has a library, just books and books. Yes, he's pivoting it again,
I'm
and
pivoting because the Triumph I showed you earlier, the 60 TR3A,
yeah, he's
that
showing it
is
to us now.
literally, that is a barn find. That car was found in a barn in Oxford when Doug went down there to see it. It sat in that, the family owned it 25 years. And for at least the last 10 or 15 years, it sat in the barn at a boatyard in Oxford. And I
Yeah.
helped them pull it out of there. And I mean, the steering was stuck, the wheels are stuck, it literally was a barn find. And it was just one of those things where it's exciting. You get goosebumps at the
Yes.
same
Yes.
time.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and it's like, oh, the potential. And then you realize, oh, the rust.
Yep. Yep.
It's like,
Yeah.
The
oh
Well,
rea- the
God,
Russ.
this
reality
car needs
sinks
so
in.
much.
Yes.
But I got to
Rust
tell
comes
you,
for everybody. Yeah, as they
that
say, Father
car,
Time is undefeated.
yeah,
And
that car is
yeah,
now, the engine's rebuilt, transmission's rebuilt, waiting to go back in the car. It's waiting on me, so I got to get going on it. So
amen. Well,
thank you for having me.
hey, we're not going to hold you much longer, but
Yes.
love to have you back. I
I'd
am
be
just
honored.
so we'd love to have you. I just like, and you're maybe the second or third person that we've interviewed who it just feels so authentic when we have you on and you're broadcasting from your barn, from your garage, so that we can see all of this. It's
Yep.
just, with the fluorescent shop lights across the top, over his right shoulder. He's got the 911 up on a lift underneath the car cover. Very mysterious, but uber cool, man. And the Volvo is over the left
Volvo
shoulder,
over
which
there.
I'm a Volvo guy,
67.
so I'm,
Are you?
yeah, I'm
Well,
just drooling
I've
all over
got
my notebook here. Yeah.
Christian, I got a couple good Volvo stories. One of my clients has a 62 210 Duet.
Oh boy.
That is, he brought it home from Sweden, brought it over here from Sweden when he worked there. And that car, I did a lot of work to that car. First car I've ever worked on has 2 heater cores, one on each side. And it's
Wow.
not supposed to have that. It only has one, but it lived above the Arctic Circle its whole life.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
it turned out, we found out that it was orange in the engine compartment and that the car was owned by the Swedish telephone company. And they painted all their vehicles orange. And someone owned the car
Wow.
after that. They bought the car, they painted it blue, and it was owned by a textile business and it lived above the Arctic Circle. So someone added another heater core to have heat in the car. And it has this, you ever seen the radiator shades on the old
No,
Volvos?
no.
I had to make one from scratch. I had to go to Lowe's and buy a blind from a leveler blind. It was
Oh,
crazy. Oh,
we're
good
gonna
story
have
there.
you back. We gotta
Okay.
have you back. We'll get
Thank
into
you.
we'll get deep into some of these stories, and
Yeah.
I'm just it's been real wonderful geeking out with you. What do you think, Doug? What do you think about our barn find today? James, our
Yep.
barn
This
find.
this was the barn find in the season.
It was it
Well-
was a blast, and I love when we reconnect with old friends. So
Yes.
again, if you want to reach out to James, get a hold of James, we will have his information on our website, carslove.com. We will also have
It'll be in the show notes as well.
Exactly. So if you're listening to the show, you will be 2 or 3 clicks away from everything you need to know about James, his business, how to get a hold of him, and
Can I
engage
just
him
say
if needed.
I
Yes.
no longer take Dogecoin or the Doge and the other one. I don't take that as payment anymore.
But Ethereum, he's
Ethereum.
good with. He's got no
Ethereum.
problem with Ethereum.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
he's
Bitcoin's
he's
still
a
okay,
cash
but-
guy.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Elon
Well-
pumped and dumped. No.
Yeah, I hear
Okay.
you. Well, all right, James, it was
Hey,
great
it's
meeting
been a
you.
pleasure. Thank you very
James,
much.
great
Likewise.
reconnecting with
Thank you, Doug.
I can't wait to make it out to your garage.
Yes. Yeah,
soon,
come
your
down and see
barn.
us.
Yep.
And I'll show you in the other right down the line here in the building. I've got another bay full of vintage sports cars that I can show you.
Can't wait.
Maybe for
Yeah.
the next time. We'll
Absolutely.
show you some more cars.
This might be our entree into a YouTube show with video, because I wish everybody could see what we're seeing. It really is
Oh, we got
remarkable.
some cool
And,
stuff.
congratulations on all you've built, James. I mean that.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Christian.
Yeah.
And Doug, thank you very much for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
Ditto.
And
Yeah.
Thank you much.
it's really cool to reconnect with someone from high school, especially though that we're car guys. And, I had no idea. And I'm so glad you reached out. This is really cool.
Ditto.
Dig it.
Well, we have Joe to thank, and
Yes, thank you, Joe.
Thanks,
If you're
Joe.
listening.
Joe's another barn find. Joe's
Yes.
another barn find, broadcasting
Joe,
from his
let's
barn.
just say Joe is one of a kind barn find.
Yeah. Barn
Joe
find, boat
He has
find,
more cylinders than anyone I know.
I love it. I love
Yeah.
it. Sounds like
and boats too.
He's a car guy. Yeah, boats and cars for sure.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, gentlemen. Well, this
Wonderful.
has
Thank
been
you,
great.
guys.
Thank you again. All right, Doug. And we
Yep.
will see you later, Cars Love Nation. To all the cars I've loved before, reach out. Christian at carslove.com, Doug at carslove.com. We'll see you soon. Next time. Take care. Goodbye.
Thank you, guys.
Take care.
Bye.